Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Comic Shop Adventure. Forgive me if my voice is kind of raspy today. I'm feeling a bit under the weather, but feeling good enough to go out and leave the homestead and adventure for more comics and collectibles this week. And last week we had a nice little week. The two big standouts were books that really stand out all the time. Pretty much the end of James Tynion, or however, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but the end of the Detective Comics run. Holy cow, that was great. All the loose ends tied up, all the conflict between the different team members, that were established since the DC Rebirth. Even Clayface makes a little appearance. He was one of my favorite parts of this whole run, was Clayface's involvement with the Bat Team, and the conflict with Tim Drake was just really, really well sewn up, and it was one of the times where I got a little, I won't say super emotional, but I kind of started realizing, holy cow, I love this book and I love the writing on it, and it's ending. Not the book itself, but at least the run. So that's it's kind of it's the end of an era, and I'm happy it went out. It kept going as well as it did. The worst that book ever was okay. Like, the worst an issue of that run was still okay. That's pretty good. It a lot more hits than misses, and just a great run. And then the Flash Wars beginning. Other people on YouTube have kind of said this is DC retconning its biggest mistake, and to a certain extent, I think that might be what's going on. I know I got back into reading comics because I had more accessibility to it with the New 52. But that being said, so many people who were previously reading DC Comics in the New 52 did not like what was done with the Flash. And while I really enjoyed New 52 Flash, I loved how they introduced the new Wally. Wally pre-Flashpoint had quite the following, and I was familiar with pre-Flashpoint Wally from whenever I was a child, but yeah, it's they're kind of, DC, and a lot of people say are kind of critical of it, but DC's kind of found their way to kind of have their cake and eat it too with both Wallys, and this might be the storyline to where they can kind of bring back the old Wally completely in the way that it was pre-Flashpoint to I guess it's kind of have their cake and eat it too. It looks. I'm really excited about this run. I always praise the Flash is maybe the book that's great that doesn't get the attention it deserves. And right now, it seems like that book is finally getting the attention that it deserves from the community. But I am off. I will catch back up with you when I return to the homestead here at Athletic Geek HQ with my bounty of comics for the week. See you in a bit. Hey everyone, I am back at the homestead here at Athletic Geek HQ, and got quite an interesting week of comics here. It's I don't really have a whole lot of just the main numbered issues in my stack this week. A lot of annuals, a lot of one-shots. It's a very, very interesting week, and we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to go ahead and get started. The only Marvel book from the pull list this week is Daredevil number 603 here, and I feel like this series has kind of been picking up a little bit. It's been very hit and miss since the end of the Wade run, but it's still been fairly decent for the most part, so I enjoy Daredevil, and going to keep picking up this book unless it just gets absolutely unreadable, and it's not that. So picked up that. We also have Saga Chapter 52, my only Image independent book that I'm reading. Read Saga. There, it's a great book. Is it up and down like any book? Absolutely, but for the most part, this has been one of the most And I've been reading this book since 2013. I was late to the party on it, but this has always been one of the most consistently good books whenever it's out. And it kind of has a different run. They take months off at a time. It's almost like it's a TV show, but I have nothing bad to say about Saga because it's a great book. And if you have not heard of Saga, if you have not read any of Saga yet, go pick up the trade paperbacks, get caught up, and just experience this book for yourself. Alright, now we go to DC, which, yeah, I don't believe there's any just main book out there other than like an annual or a side story or a one-shot. No, at least on my pull list, none of that this week. But we have Doomsday Clock #5. This book has been marred by a bunch of delays, but it's it's still pretty much everything that has started the DC rebirth, with the Watchmen being integrated back into, or being integrated into, I should say, main DC continuity. So been marred by a bunch of delays, but it's still a very, very interesting title, and I'm interested to see how everything plays out. So #5 of 12 miniseries going. It's, or I should say maxi series, because it's 12 issues. But speaking of miniseries, we have Justice League No Justice. This is #4 of 4, and this is going to directly lead into the beginning of the Justice League by Scott Snyder run that will start next week. So this concludes this series to start that series. So I really don't know what they're doing, because it's all one series, but I guess it's the prologue to it, and they kind of thought it'd be better to kind of phrase it this way with the 4 different teams. But I've loved this book so far. It's been very, very good. Scott Snyder is probably one of, if not my favorite writer in comic books today. And he can write all these characters in the DC universe just as well as he can write Batman. From there, we have Green Lantern's annual #1. And not really... Annual books, to me, are very, very hit and miss. And they can either be nice little one-shots, they can be good conclusions, they can be good beginnings, but sometimes it's just kind of, I buy a lot of annuals just to be a completist for my collection. A lot of times I end up just kind of thumbing through them and realizing, this is okay. Probably shouldn't be that way, because there have been a lot of great annual books out there that have told great stories, introduced great new characters, and been good, like I said, good conclusions or good beginnings to new things. But a lot of times, in my experience, since I've been consistently collecting, annuals have just kind of been, here's a story, and it just is what it is. But I have it, I'll read it, and if it stands out, you'll hear about it next week. But Green Lantern's annual #1. From there, we go into Batman Prelude to the Wedding, Part 1, Robin versus Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul. I'm sure somebody will... There's different pronunciations, but there is... I can't remember which one is that Jenny O'Neill and Neil Adams said is the official. They're doing these really, really cool versus books before the big Catwoman Batman wedding story takes place in the Batman books, and I'm going to be checking these out and seeing the interaction between the characters. And, I'm not really a big Damian Wayne fan, but seeing as how Ra's is his grandfather, I'm just interested to see how this story will play out, and subsequently how it will bleed into the rest of the story. So, I'm going to give that a read. And then finally, the first of a weekly Superman event series, we have The Man of Steel #1 by Brian Michael Bendis. This is the beginning of Brian Michael Bendis and his leaving Marvel to have a go at Superman on the DC side of things. And I will fully admit that I was not... In Action Comics #1000, is comprised of a lot of different shorter Superman stories by a lot of different writers, and I have to say that the Bendis story was the one that kind of gripped me in the least. So that kind of gives me a little trepidation going into this book here. However, still the novelty of Bendis, not at Marvel, at DC of all places, he really for better or for worse, really towed that company line, you know, on social media when he was with Marvel. And to see him writing the characters that I'm not going to really say that he disrespected. He certainly, you know, respected the characters, but he made sure that when he was with Marvel, they were not above, you know, the ones that he was writing. I'm just interested. I'm interested. Is it a novelty that'll wear off? Perhaps. Is it something that might be breathe new life into Bendis' career and his subsequent writing? It might be. I can't pass a judgment on it. I can't pass a full judgment on how I feel about Brian Michael Bendis writing Superman out of a small short story from a book. I got to get more out of it before I can fully form an opinion. So we'll find out after this series, and if I'm on board with him and his continued stories with Superman after this. But very, very excited to read this just because, you know, because of the novelty. And if the novelty works and brings about good writing, then novelty is cool. But speaking of novelty, we have some very interesting one-shots. I remember last year DC Comics did crossovers with Looney Tunes characters, and a lot of them were very, very good. The best one being the Elmer Fudd Batman crossover, and you wouldn't think these stories would be as good as they are, but they are. They're fantastic. This year they are doing a crossover with the Hanna Barbera cartoons. So I've got was able to pick up a couple for this what do we call it, event, if you will. We have the Flash and Speed Buggy. As a kid, I always thought that Speed Buggy was kind of cool. You know, he's a talking race car, and I just thought it was cool. Thought it was neat, and yeah, I just really like to see how this story plays out. You know, if nothing else, I think it'll just be fun. You know, Elmer Fudd and Batman went above and beyond, and it's great. You know, and it's set a whole new standard for what these books can be. But at the end of the day, especially something like this, it's supposed to be a fun story, and I'm looking very forward to having fun reading this one. And on the another one of those books that also came out is Aquaman and Jabberjaw. You know, the main reason I picked up is like Aquaman can communicate with you know, with fish and underwater life. How does he communicate with a shark that can already talk? So that's something I think might be interesting, and just again, it you know, it can be fun. The Batman Elmer Fudd would actually told like a really, really fantastic story. It was fun, but the way they did it could be taken seriously as a story. These books, if they're taken seriously and able to be done that way, great. If they're really just something that make me smile when I get done reading, that's good too. So, also pretty excited about this one. Let me know what you guys were able to pick up in your local comic shop, if you had a bigger pull list, or if you picked up some of these cool one-shots. Let me know what you got in the comments section below. Be sure to like the Facebook page for more content, and if you also enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I am the Athletic Geek, and I will see you next time.